Welcome to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, the podcast where insights and innovation meet. Every episode, we dive into conversations with industry leaders, experts, and change makers, bringing you the stories and ideas in the renewable energy sector that shape our world. And now, let's jump into today's episode with your host, Wes Ashworth. Welcome back to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy. Today's guest is someone who bridges two worlds in a way that very few can. Meghan Milo is the Director of Energy Solutions, Curriculum, and Instruction at Madison Energy Infrastructure, where she helps schools across the country adopt solar energy systems that save money, reduce emissions, and build resilience. But Meghan isn't just about panels on rooftops. As a former middle school teacher, she knows the power of education, and she's now leading efforts to bring solar into the classroom, inspiring the next generation of energy leaders. From helping entire school districts go 100% solar, to designing lessons where students see clean energy in action for the very first time, Meghan is proving that solar is not just infrastructure, it's inspiration. This conversation is about the economics of solar, the role schools play in shaping the clean energy workforce, and the human stories that remind us why this transition matters. Meghan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me to speak with you. And thanks for the important work that you're doing to share insights from industry leaders so that we can all learn from each other.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed listening to some of the podcasts in preparation for this discussion. And one that really stuck with me was the one where you spoke with Kimberly Santera of TerraPro and her emphasis on mentorship in the industry to help each other, especially women, grow professionally in this industry. And she brought a quote that I think is really relevant. She said, "If not me, then who? And if not now, then when?" And especially, I think that podcast was recorded, before we've had all these changes in Washington.
Yeah.
But, it seems like kind of a mindset that can be applied at almost any time and is really important. So thank you for bringing these thought leaders to the table.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you. And Kimberly is one of my favorite people on the planet. So she's a phenomenal person and leader. So anybody that hasn't listened to that one, for sure, go check that one out. But leading this conversation off and thinking about sort of origins and how it all got started. So you began your career as a sixth grade math teacher. I guess what drew you into education first, and then what ultimately led you to leave the classroom for the solar industry?
Teaching was my last stop before my entry into renewable energy, but actually there was even a more winding path before that.
Yeah.
So even before teaching, I worked for an engineering firm. So throughout my career, there have been some common threads of environment, energy, education. But, when I first graduated from college, I studied economics with an emphasis in environmental economics. I ended up working for an engineering firm that specialized in green design for schools.
Oh, cool.
And energy efficiency, which involved things like utility bill analysis and even education for building occupants on how to interact with their green building design. And then I went into teaching. And so what led me into teaching is really, like I said, that kind of common thread of environment, community engagement. And I really was interested, I'd always been interested in education and serving my community. And what drew me to education was the direct impact and feedback you can have on a daily basis. And I really view that as an ultimate public service. So I taught for almost 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of things in the world changed in 2020 between COVID and a personal life change of having twins in the midst of a pandemic. I was beginning to just think about what the next step was. And I was looking at opportunities both in continuing with teaching and then opportunities beyond the classroom. And that's where I really got lucky in finding a kind of being in the right place at the right time and finding a solar company located here in Virginia, where I'm based, that was specializing in schools and wanting to deliver on its promises, not only to put solar panels on roofs, but also to use those panels and those projects as a way to connect students with those educational opportunities. So it really was kind of a perfect combination of all of my previous work that I never would have dreamed of,
Yeah.
10 years ago, but has been a really neat journey.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just seeing the story, and it's amazing. Getting to watch so many careers over the years and things like that. How much just right place, right time, and the universe just kind of puts you there. Where you're needed, and
Hmm.
all this experience that you've had before that. It's all helping you today, and this perfect marriage between kind of all your experiences that you can really make a difference. And so that's it's incredible. And I
Yeah.
think education is one of the most important topics in the industry and renewable energy, clean tech industry as a whole. So having more folks like yourself, I think is really important to the industry. Thinking about those years in the classroom, what did that teach you about systems, leadership, or impact that you now carry into your work with schools and solar and doing the work you're doing now?
Well, I am continually surprised and grateful for what training as a teacher has given me in an industry and corporate environment. I wear two hats. I do curriculum engagement, and then I also work with schools to understand the value of solar from a technological and procurement perspective. And, teaching is about forming a relationship with your students
Yeah.
and with your audience, communicating that information in a way that engages people and makes connections that interest them, you know? So every day, in a classroom, you're always practicing that. Why should this matter to you? And how do I make it interesting?
Yeah.
And how do I get you to understand the thing that I want you to understand? And that's origination, that's sales,
Right.
And so coming at it from that perspective of what does my audience care about and how does what I have to tell them matter to them is a direct translation that I got a lot of practice with in teaching and have really enjoyed applying in my new role. There's another really clear connection here, which is, the curriculum engagement
Hmm.
portion. So I think having been a teacher, designing tools for teachers really can go a long way. So I have been there. I've been in a classroom when the roof is being replaced
Right.
and, seen the distraction of students. I have also, struggled to find time with all of the demands of the different standards to really do innovative and hands-on projects.
Yeah.
So being able to have that perspective and making sure that everything that we develop in terms of these classroom connections is aligned with existing curriculum and
Mhm.
is not giving teachers one more thing to do, but is actually giving them something that will help them teach the concept that they need to teach
Right.
and make it memorable for students and form those important connections is really a perspective that I could only arrive at if I had been in the classroom prior
Yeah.
to this role.
Absolutely. And really, your story of moving from the classroom into solar, you're still connected to the classroom, which is incredible, but it sets the stage perfectly. And I want to look at how that experience translates into real world impact for schools as they decide whether or not to embrace solar and how to do that as well too. So when you sit down with a school district that really has never explored solar, not on the radar, how do you make the case and what do you want them to understand right away?
The biggest thing to understand when you're a school, in particular with a business model that we work within,
Yeah.
called a power purchase agreement, typically, is that there really is real benefit here and there's not necessarily a catch.
Yeah.
And so, I think a lot of what we fight against is like this idea that it's too good to be true.
Right.
And there are just there's three main benefits that schools can take advantage of through solar, and this is not exclusive to schools, but these are the ones that really serve schools through our offering. So the first is economic.
Yeah.
So it's actually very economically advantageous
Mhm.
in many cases for a school to go solar. But the second is environment. So of course solar energy is a clean and renewable energy source. So schools that have goals of, sustainability plans that they're trying to meet, renewable energy goals, stewardship, leadership goals can take advantage of solar in that way. And then the last is education, which I think we're going to get into a little bit more in this conversation,
Yeah.
but is really through that leadership, not only having a technology available at the school, but using that as a launching point for education, enhancement, and workforce development. And what's really beautiful for schools, and why I think sometimes people are taken aback and they say, "Oh, but where is the catch?" is that you don't have to sacrifice one of those benefits for the other.
Yeah.
So, we have some schools that come to us and say, our highest priority, this is in line with our sustainability plan and our goals for, reaching net zero at 2050 or whatever it may be. And then they can still leverage those economic benefits.
Okay.
They can still get on-site, predictable rates of solar energy, and save, millions of dollars for their district. And they can still get the educational benefits. And then we have some schools and they say, you know what? We don't have a sustainability plan. We don't want to talk about a sustainability plan,
Hmm.
but we are struggling to meet our budgets. We are struggling with our infrastructure. We're struggling to pay our teachers, and we are looking for every solution possible to save money and be able to direct our resources, less to our buildings and more to our teachers and students. And that is another really compelling reason why we help our clients.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's good stuff and such important work. And I think you've covered several things just that initial pushback. And you're right. Most of it's sort of it's too good to be true. And when you're able to really explain that and walk through that, it's incredible to kind of see the other side of that. And then thinking about the work you do with schools, you shared with me that some of the schools have used their solar savings to hire teachers or invest in new programs, which is incredible. Can you share one of those stories and what it meant for that specific community?
Sure, I can share two stories if
Yeah,
that's okay.
absolutely.
Both of these are stories in Virginia, but kind of very different contexts to which they came to solar and arrived at the benefits of it. So the first one was in Northern Virginia, a very large school district. They were growing so rapidly. They were adding, a couple schools a year.
Yeah.
So they were really struggling to keep up with their population. They're building new schools. They're trying to figure out how would this new infrastructure do we make good choices, both financial, environmental. And so we ended up doing a pilot project with them at Stafford County Public Schools.
Okay.
It actually was a huge high school, ended up being the largest rooftop school array in the state.
Wow. Okay.
And is going to save them $2.8 million over the length of the contract.
Yeah.
And not only that, it really ended up being something that the community got really excited about.
Oh, cool.
Both from an education perspective. We worked through our Solar Empowered Schools program. We engaged with everything from elementary school, doing actually partnering with an art teacher, to middle school, where this was really neat. The energy manager graduated from this district.
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah.
he went through their career and technical education program. He's a licensed electrician. So he and I partnered on a career awareness
Yeah.
month presentation together, which is a really neat full circle moment. And then at the high school level, we did some, solar circuit building, some dashboard analysis. So really kind of got teachers and students engaged in ways that are repeatable year after year.
Yeah.
From the K through 12. So that was really exciting. And, that was an approach where the school said, we want to do one big project first.
Sure.
And then we want to use this as a foundation to build upon. And so kind of on the other side of the state, we had a school district that was maybe not growing as quickly, had different challenges. And their challenges were really centered around reducing operational costs and funding infrastructure improvements, finding the money for the roof replacement, finding the money for the site maintenance. And so they had to go seek voter approval for a sales tax increase to help fund their school's budget. And then they came to solar and they realized that they could demonstrate financial leadership and show taxpayers that, we're exploring. I don't know if I would call it innovative, because we're now getting to a point where schools are, the secret's out.
Yeah.
But we're exploring creative or, not status quo solutions to reducing our energy budget. And so they started with a first wave of schools. We are now in wave 4,
Wow.
where we've now completed up to 15 schools and will save them $9 million over the course of each contract.
Wow.
So,
It's
yeah,
incredible. Two
yeah,
incredible stories. And different too. I love that the needs were different, but the solution worked, and just those savings and everything else that's involved. Absolutely incredible. And of course I love the career development, and we are going to need a lot of electricians in the future among many other positions, but that one in particular. And AI can't replace that one. Need lots of those. So
in
that's
fact,
incredible.
AI is going to create a need for a lot more of
Agreed.
them,
A
I
lot
think.
more electricians, without a doubt. Um, is thinking about another topic, and just going with the public schools. We've talked a little bit about in a previous conversation that the idea of price certainty really matters a lot for the public schools in particular. Can you explain that a little bit, and sort of the whys behind that?
Price certainty, of course, for anybody, but especially public institutions, is really important because, of course, schools are funded by taxpayers.
Yeah.
They have a certain budget, and it is hard to adapt in that environment to unforeseen costs. And it's very hard to predict what those costs will be when you don't know what your energy rate is going to be.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know of any energy manager. We can forecast all day long, but even if you think about your own residential bill, like, can you tell me what your rate that you pay per kilowatt hour will be in 6 months or in 3 years?
Yeah.
Or in 20 years. And of course, nobody can predict that. And we can forecast, but we don't know how lumpy it's going to be.
Sure.
So a couple of summers ago, we were having conversations with local school districts, and they were saying, we saw a 25% spike in our energy bill last month, and we don't know how we're going to handle that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what is and maybe this is a good time to, talk about the structure of a power purchase agreement. But
Sure.
the way that a power purchase agreement works is that you are connected to a utility, which all schools are, of course. They pay an electricity bill, and most of that bill has a structure where they pay a certain rate per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And so the way that a power purchase agreement works is that somebody like a solar developer, owner, operator like Madison would come in and develop the system. We build the system and we own the system.
Mhm.
And the agreement is just for the school to pay for the energy that is produced by that system on site and that serves the school. So it's a per kilowatt hour charge that's agreed upon. And
Yeah.
what's beautiful about this in terms of creating price certainty is we say, here's the rate. Sometimes there is an annual escalator between 0 and 3%, which is relatively low compared to average utility
Yeah.
escalation rates. And this is exactly what you're going to pay per kilowatt hour for the next 20 to 25 to 30 years, depending on the length of the contract. So, in many cases, when we work with schools, we can provide a lower rate than what they were currently paying, which is resulting in savings. It costs them $0 up front. We take care of all of the operations and maintenance for those decades to come.
Yeah.
So they don't have to dedicate any additional staff time. And it creates this certainty where the school can look at how much electricity they use in an average year and create some budget line items and predictions that they can rely upon year to year in their forecasting and budgeting.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Thank you for breaking that down. And it does just make so much sense, when you look at it for these schools. Another thing I thought was really interesting. So some of the schools you've worked with didn't even realize they were already powered by solar, which is probably a win. But what does that say about how solar is blending into the fabric of daily life?
Sure. Yeah. And I sometimes, I think it is possible. That particular example that I shared was from a teacher workshop where people who were and were not our solar partners were invited. And so, I'm hesitant to say that our customers didn't know that there was solar because it's a lot of my job to kind of work on that engagement. But what I will say is that I have been in schools that I have seen that, from the beginning to the end of the designs and installation, and you walk into those schools and you don't notice any difference.
Yeah.
A lot of times when these schools have a flat roof, you can barely see the solar panels.
Yeah.
They don't make any noise. They don't move. They require very little maintenance. which is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the challenges that we all face when it comes to making sustainable energy decisions is that we are able to not think about where our energy comes from because it just works. But also what's beautiful about it is it just works.
Yeah.
And solar is one of those situations.
Yeah.
I think it really has the potential to blend into daily life. And it's our challenge as a partner to find those pockets where we can point it out in beneficial and enhancing and amplifying ways while making sure that people aren't noticing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think to me, it's a win to say that it can be a situation where maybe a small portion doesn't even know that they're solar. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That's business as usual. Things are working as they should. It's not a big eyesore or anything like that. So that's phenomenal to me. And kind of as you pinpointed here, like the savings and sustainability benefits are clear, especially when it comes to these
hmm
schools. And then to me, what really distinguishes your work is how those panels on the roof then come alive inside the classroom and talking about building the future as well too. And I think this is where the story of solar shifts from infrastructure to inspiration. And so you've led an initiative called Solar Empowered Schools. How does this program move beyond the panels on the roof and into the minds of students?
Yeah, Solar Empowered Schools is a broad term for our initiative. And really, our mission is to help students shine through solar energy education. And it was born out of really just listening to our partners. So, when we were first serving our school partners, we were approaching projects like most energy suppliers or construction companies would, which is like, here's the project that we're going to do. We're going to build it. And
Yeah.
then we're going to make sure it works. And the more we talk to schools, they, were coming back to us and saying, well, how can we connect this to the students? What can we bring into the classroom? How can we tell our middle schoolers, high schoolers about the jobs that they can prepare for in
Yeah.
these industries? And so this was really born out of listening to a customer need.
Yeah.
And we also really noticed that this is where schools become proud of their solar projects, right? Like it powers their schools, the lights turn on, but it's also a chance for communities to really celebrate their leadership. And so that's what we aim for with Solar Empowered Schools. So we have a mix of materials, curriculum, all aimed to help either give teachers resources to share with their students, kind of a train the trainer model,
Yeah.
or to help students engage directly with the solar panels. So, a couple examples are that we have a curriculum library that has a mix of both digital tools that are available on demand. All of our tools are designed to be plug and play for teachers while being adaptable. Like, so when I was a teacher, I couldn't help but want to change one little thing
Sure.
in the lesson to, change it to my curriculum or make it more relevant to the standard or to provide an accommodation to a student that I had.
Yeah.
And so we have everything from a virtual solar tour to a lesson that not only takes the dashboard, so that the real-time solar energy dashboard,
Yeah.
but is a framework for students to engage with it, interpret it, and then make predictions based on their understanding. In addition to that, when we partner with schools, we also provide some hands-on activities,
Yeah.
which I think provide, the most aha moments and the most squeals of excitement.
Right. It's such important and valuable work that you're doing. And I think bringing it into the classroom. So it's a part of, what you're learning and getting excited about. And I think back, like, we didn't talk about solar when I was in school. Wasn't even a topic, never came up. And so it's incredible to see even that evolution and it happening, and part of the important work that you're doing, obviously, and helping to bring that. You told me too about teaching a lesson using some of that real-time solar data and, a specific example. I'd love to hear that and put that out there for the audience, just what happened in that room and how the students respond.
Sure. Yeah. So, it's really interesting what one graph can tell you about an energy source, patterns. And what's beautiful about the solar energy production curve is that, in kindergarten, we learn about weather.
Yeah.
We learn about patterns, all the way up to high school physics, where we're learning about the difference between renewable and non-renewable, the difference between energy sources, what's the difference between a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So there is so much that we can learn from a 3-day curve of real-time energy. And I will also say that the dashboard is really important in terms of engagement. I was teaching a workshop to educators once, and I, flashed up the school's dashboard. And at the end of the workshop, I asked for some feedback, and the primary feedback that this teacher gave me was, she said, as soon as I saw that dashboard, I was totally invested because it was solar on my school. And
Yeah.
somehow that connection between, no, this is not just a dashboard somewhere across the country. This is, I can see a cloud go overhead and I can match that to the data that I'm seeing right
Right.
now on this screen. And that really goes a long way. So one of the things that we do in our dashboard lesson is we just start with, a historical energy curve. It has 3 or 4 days. Some of the curves are choppy. Some of the curves are smooth, depending on the day. And I just say, what do you notice and what do you wonder? And you'd be surprised at how much you can get just from those 2 questions. But it really forces students to stop and think about, oh, wait, why aren't we getting energy at night?
Yeah.
What does that tell me about the energy source? What does happen on a day that it snows? And so it really is a great discussion starter. What we do at the end of the lesson is we take a look at the weather for the next 3 days, and we have students draw a curve to predict
Oh, cool.
what the curve will look like. And then, we go back in 3 days and see how close they were. And we do have an example from that school with the largest solar array in Virginia that
Uh-huh.
I told you about, where one student got like amazingly close.
Yeah.
So it was really, it keeps them coming back. It
Yeah.
makes it more than just like a screen that they walk by every day. And I'm a former math teacher, so anytime we can look at a graph and interpret a graph, I find it very, very valuable, especially if it's something that's relevant and local and meaningful to students.
Yeah, I absolutely love this and some of these examples and just the power of it. And that kid's got a
Hmm.
future in the industry, right? So he's
Yeah,
already
or
like, "Hmm,
fortune telling,
you're
one or
right.
the other.
Yeah, yeah. You're showing some promise. You also told me about, outside of just graphs, I know some people are just kind of hands on and seeing it is really
Hmm.
powerful. So a moment when a fifth grader saw a mini solar panel spin a motor and then realized that, oh, my school runs on the same technology. Can you tell a little bit about that story and then what it revealed to you?
Sure. Yeah. And I think this is just a great illustration of how, it doesn't take years and years of, I mean, I would love to see solar education, implemented at every grade level every week, all day long.
Yeah.
But all it takes is like one real moment
Yeah.
to make a connection for a student. And so this was a school district that had just finished solarizing about 20 schools and municipal buildings, a real leader here in Virginia. And yeah, I partnered with a STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math teacher in a 5th grade class. And we put together with her students very simple solar circuits. So picture a mini solar panel smaller than the palm of your hand, connected to a motor
Yeah.
that was connected to a spinning disc, and it's called a whirligig. It was adapted from a lesson developed by Solar Schoolhouse, which is somebody who we partner with sometimes. And we it was cold. It was a winter day.
Hmm.
We built all of these circuits inside. And then we walked outside into the courtyard. And luckily, this school had a pitched roof,
Uh-huh.
so you could see the solar panels really clearly. We walked into the courtyard. She went from the shade into the sunlight, and she like raises the whirligig up and it starts to spin, and
Yeah.
her face just lit up. And here she is like raising her mini solar panel to the sun. You can see the solar panels in the background. And you realize it's the same exact technology. Seeing her make that connection and have that aha moment was certainly memorable to me, and
Yeah.
I'm confident that it was memorable to her.
Yeah, what an incredible story, and just seeing that happen. It's got to be so fulfilling to see the aha, that light bulb
Hmm.
moment where it really is connection happening. And these
Hmm.
student stories really just highlight the power of early exposure to me. And again, why your work is so important. They also do point to something bigger. And I think it's how today's classroom experiences are shaping the energy workforce of tomorrow. And so you've said before, and I love this statement, it's something I've said as well too, is electrons are electrons. I
Hmm.
guess, what do you mean by that from your perspective? And how does that mindset shape how we train the next generation of energy workers?
Sure. Yeah. I love that statement for some reasons, and then I also have my own counter to
I
that
get it.
statement, so I'll
Yep,
explain both sides.
100%.
Um, so electrons are electrons, and what I mean by that is that when you plug in your cell phone to the charger, your cell phone does not care whether those electrons came from natural gas, whether they came from hydro, whether they came from the sun. Those electrons have the same properties no matter what energy source they came from. And quite frankly, I think we need all of them to power
Yeah,
our lives,
yeah,
So in that way, when we are talking about the addition of solar energy, whether it's for a school or whether it's for a larger solar farm or whatever it may be, we're talking about adding electricity to power our lives. Sometimes we get so caught up in like, oh, this new or not, non-majority energy source. But really, at the end of the day, it's like we are building our energy supply, and
yeah,
solar is a rapidly deployable, affordable, tried and true technology to do that with. And so that's where the electrons or electrons comes from. In terms of the energy workforce, it's actually a great thing that those electrons follow the same properties of electricity as anything
right.
else, because that means that we don't have to reinvent the wheel
Yeah.
with every workforce development program. We can, continue training electricians,
Mhm.
and we can add when it makes sense, the additional unit or 2 units or safety factors that are specific to solar energy.
Yeah,
But it doesn't have to be like we need to train an entirely new workforce.
right.
And I think that's true for many other things.
Yeah.
Whether it's like data analysis or even like you know construction. The tools that we use to install a solar array are the same ones that we would use
Yeah.
elsewhere for other types of construction projects. So when I get overwhelmed about the workforce demand that we're going to have in the future for these renewable energy technologies, it's really helpful to come back and say, hey, wait a second. Ohm's law still applies.
Yes.
It's still electricity,
Yeah.
and we have the tools. We just need to add in, very strategically, those additions and specializations that can get us able to hit the ground running and from a school's perspective, differentiate their students in the workforce from the competition
Yeah,
when they,
absolutely.
apply for their first job.
Yeah. When you look at that, sort of that emerging solar workforce or the workforce of the future, we've hit on a couple of things, but any other skills that students need that schools aren't yet fully teaching? And there are a lot of transferable skills. I see that all the time in recruiting. We of course
Hmm.
pull within industry, but a lot of times we pull from adjacent industries. That's the skills
Yeah.
are connected. But anything you feel
Hmm.
like we need to maybe prepare and start teaching some additional skills or building on those?
I think like an energy supply and demand class is
Yeah, I like
something
that.
that is rare, but really helpful in terms of getting a context and foundation for understanding everything that goes into managing our energy and what jobs are applicable to that. So I would say that is emerging, that some schools are leading the way in doing that. I know that several states have developed curriculum and standards related to an energy supply and demand class. So that is kind of a specific class. I think just the more we can think about our energy and the more we can notice it and understand how it works and how many people need to, be involved, what pieces of the puzzle need to be connected for us to get to the energy future we want to see,
Yeah.
I think is important, especially in the K through 12 environment. And then beyond that, certainly, I think it would be great if we had specialized solar installer, solar technician
Yeah.
programs in particular. But to be honest with you, the core foundational skills of problem solving, of critical thinking, of teamwork, curiosity, agency, innovation, um, are the most important things. Like that's what I look for when I recruit. A lot of this stuff can be learned and everything is evolving so quickly that you kind of, I mean, I couldn't even tell you what a solar training program should look like in 10 years,
Yeah.
because there's just it's so dynamic.
Yeah.
And of course, some things will remain true, but I also just think that ability to adapt, to be curious, to learn, to know that you don't know, but know how to do the first step and keep going to the next step
Yeah.
is the most important thing. And so in some ways, schools are teaching that. And in some ways, it's easy to get caught up in you have to know this procedure or this standard.
Right.
But the more that schools can encourage students to really independently make connections and solve problems, the more prepared they're going to be for this rapidly changing and exciting and turbulent sometimes industry. The last thing I would say is that professionalism goes a long way. Like it's,
Sure.
with any class, it may be hard to dedicate resources and time that's so limited to like, here's how you write a professional email.
Yeah.
Here's
Yeah.
here's when you should pick up the phone, and here's when you should, it should just be a Slack message. For entry level workforce, that really does go a long way in terms of whether you're going to be successful and
Right.
how you can continue to learn and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points there overall. And I think I've said it before, the overall just kind of greater renewable industry, it's one of the most innovative, forward thinking, just cutting edge technology. Anything that you are interested in, there's a career in it. If it's AI, great, got that. Drones, got it. Finance,
Mm-hmm.
accounting, communications, you name it. Like the industry is embracing all of those things and moving at a very quick pace. And I think sometimes not as stuck in, you've got some really old industries that just take forever to change and to evolve and bring in some new things. But this one it's an exciting one, a great career for anybody. So we've covered a lot of ground, from economics to education to the evolving workforce. I want to pull back the lens a little bit and reflect on the bigger picture and what lies ahead. So if every listener could walk away just seeing energy in a new light, what would you want that insight to be?
3 things. One, we need energy to power our world, right? We need it. We
Yeah.
we can't just say, sorry, we don't want this anymore, right? We need it. And we have choices in which types of energy we choose and the impact that has. And there's no one solution,
Yeah.
right? And then the third is that we all have a part to play. So, whether we want to become professionals in this industry and contribute directly, but there are so many adjacent ways that we can influence the composition and structure of the future of our energy landscape, whether it's voting with our dollars, voting on policy
Yeah.
as citizens, or contributing. I mean, there's just so many careers that I never even dreamed of would be so influential. Law is one of them.
Mhm.
The nothing happens if we don't have rules and money
Yeah.
for any
Right.
of this stuff. So even knowing that if you know you want to be a lawyer, know that there's a place for you in solar. If you
Absolutely.
know that you want to work in manufacturing, know that there's a place for you in solar. So in terms of insight, I would say the bottom line is do what you can and keep your eyes and ears open for ways that you can influence our energy choices.
Yeah, I love that. Very well said. What gives you the most hope when you look at what schools, students, and communities are doing with solar?
If I were to boil it down, I would say the hope is the power of one. So I shared, that one student with the aha moment. I don't know if she's going to go into solar, but I do know that experience influenced her in some way. I've also have many examples of whether it's student advocacy groups or one facilities manager advocating for multiple county organizations that have been able to make a transformation, or even one teacher too.
Yeah.
They have been able to transform their community to solar energy in a way that has been really positive. So my hope is that, I think it can be overwhelming to think about how do we get to the perfect solution.
Right.
But if we think about what we can do when we wake up every day to make things the way that we want to be,
Mhm.
then that gives me hope.
Yeah, I love it. And thinking about just maybe a school district leader that's listening right now and feeling curious but overwhelmed, as you mentioned there,
Mhm.
what would you say to help them take the first step?
So I think the first step is to find a trusted partner and to understand the potential
Yeah.
of solar energy to benefit your community and according to your goals.
Yeah.
So, whether that's energy savings, whether that's sustainability or the education piece, like I said, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. So, first would be defining your goals and then understanding the potential. And we have a couple links up
Yeah.
on our Solar Empowered Schools website that are just kind of high level guides to, is solar good for my school? What are the major things to consider to know if there's good potential here or not? And the next is to find a trusted partner, whether it's consulting with somebody who provides clean energy solutions like Madison, or finding a third party. So, for example, there's an organization, nonprofit called Generation 180 that has a school leaders network. They have nearly 100 members from every state that have been through the solar process and are there to share their insights. So those are people, everything from facilities directors to school board members to superintendents, everybody who has a role to play in getting solar on schools. They have people that you can talk to tell you about their experience and their advice for your school. So if you're looking for like a trusted third party, that's a great place to start. And of course, you're welcome to reach out to us or, any other developer to get the process started. I think it all begins with interest and a question, and to open your mind to, I would approach it with curiosity instead of suspicion. I am the first to admit that, my first reaction is really like, what are you trying to get from me? But in this particular case, we just celebrated our 150th school turning on. And like I said, there are many examples that this is still an act of leadership, but you don't have to be a pioneer anymore.
Yeah.
You can
Yes.
be a leader, but you don't have to be the first one.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's great stuff there. And I will link some of that in the show notes as well, too. So listeners can go and check that out. Final question. Any other kind of parting words of advice, words of hope, anything else you didn't get to share that you'd like to? I'll give you the floor and let you take it for a minute or so.
No, what I really appreciate you having me on. Loved this conversation. And I think the lens of workforce development and just how we're going to build these renewable energy solutions together is so important. And the last thing I'd leave you with is really that there's a place for everyone in renewable energy. I mean, whether you want to work straight out of high school or whether you have a PhD, whether you like to work in the field or whether you want to be in an office, and whether you want to be kind of on the policy end, you like, reading law policy, or you want to be turning wrenches, you want to be thinking technically. There's everything in between, and we just don't know how it's going to change. And I think that's really exciting. I think things are going to continue to change and evolve. I think we're going to see a lot of improvements, and I'm feeling positive. But it takes keeping an open mind and curiosity to those opportunities and figuring out how you fit in.
Yeah, I love all of that, and this has been such a fun and enjoyable conversation, and incredibly insightful. And I know to me made a big difference in just how you think about it and thinking about the future and just that hope as well too. So a huge thanks to you for coming on and showing us what's possible when schools think bigger, not just about savings on their utility bills, but about solar to shape culture, curriculum, and community. To our listeners out there, if you enjoyed this conversation, share it with a friend or colleague who cares about the future of schools and the future of energy. And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, wherever you listen to podcasts, so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, was brought to you by Lee Group Search. If you enjoyed today's discussion and are looking to recruit top talent for your company, or find your next career opportunity in the renewable energy sector, visit leegroupsearch.com. Let's continue driving the future of clean energy together. Until next time, keep pushing toward a greener future.